That I am from Vedanta Society, Berkeley, and since May 85 I've been there, and then I must first of all offer my heartfelt respect and reverence for Swami Swahananda, who arranged for my go and stay at Berkeley. And it is because of his honor I accepted this invitation to come. Now, it's a wonderful occasion, there is no doubt about it. And then all the celebration, decoration, architects have worked, and other members also have worked, made a beautiful place to come. In our conversation, I heard some remarks. Somebody say, why spending so much time and then so much money for all this thing? It is true. But then, the father of the Jugo teacher, Patanjali, mentioned in his Jugo aphorism, after giving several options how to meditate. The last one, on anyone you like. So when we come here, at least if I cannot appreciate the importance and the purpose of this place, at least it is a very good environment. So if we believe in the teachings of Patanjali Yoga system, then we have to say that after attending and joining this celebration, we should not forget. We can remember and meditate on it. And there will be some tangible result to be obtained. What is the proof? Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna. In the great master, it has been mentioned again and again that Sri Ramakrishna, when he was young, while he was walking along the field, agricultural field, he saw a beautiful nature's scenery, a cloud, the dark cloud and all these things. He was about 6 years old. But after all, he was an avatar, So his mind got totally absorbed on it and felt unconscious. Everybody thought maybe some kind of illness. But when he regained his normal consciousness, he was telling again, no, it is not a disease. In that particular state of consciousness, I was enjoying some divine bliss. So if Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda are facts and true, then attending this kind of celebration has some deep meaning. You can find out the all deep meaning. It is not mere ritual rites and uttering the mantra and all these things and ringing the bell. It is not all. Something else. Okay, I go back to my subject.
Half the time is...
No, not yet, because I was walking from there. Only that time I've taken. All right. The subject is topic, Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna, and on me it is imposed Vivekananda's Ramakrishna and Ramakrishna as seen by Vivekananda. I'm really scared because many of you know this topic better than I know. Perhaps you can enlighten on the topics in different ways and all these things. But still, I'm standing before you, so I am to prove that I know something. This is the advantage of studying philosophy. If you study philosophy, not in detail, no need. But if you know the salient points and the arguments and the reasoning powers, it is enough. So anywhere you can establish yourself. Whether you're fool or, or intelligent, it doesn't matter. Huh? So if I say that I'm a fool, still I can prove that I'm an enlightened person. Okay. So it is called Vivekananda's Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna is seen by Vivekananda. When I was thinking, it struck my mind very much. See, every day, because of this, you can say, influence of avatara, you can say, thousands of people repeat the same prayer. Khandana bhava bandhana, ring ritam. Not like thousands, millions of people. So I find, what is the topic? I find the meaning there. Vivekananda's Ramakrishna, and Ramakrishna is seen by Vivekananda. So you can see the glories, the way Vivekananda presented Vivekananda, the glories, the truths about Sri Ramakrishna through such, you can say, composition, this prayer. There is a deep meaning. It has brought out a total, you can say, change in the culture of the human mind, you can say. It is not mere uttering, it's a deep meaning. So I shall point out to you only a few words, which perhaps you know more than I know. Khandana bhava bandhana. Sri Vivekananda's Ramakrishna, and Ramakrishna is seen by Vivekananda. Khandana bhava bandhana. Meaning is, simple meaning, breaker of the bondage of worldly existence. Or world change, whatever you call it. Worldly existence is a better word. Breaker of the bondage of worldly existence. That is Vivekananda, Ramakrishna. Here is a person who has come, who is born to break all the ties of our relation, our world bondage. So all the questions, I belong to this, that, why it is happening, that and that, everything will be taken out. Everything will be wiped out by this person, Vivekananda Ramakrishna. You may say by touch, by following his teachings, or his methods of living the life. In whatever way you go, you proceed, you will get the result. Then it says, Mochana agadushana bhikshane mahajai. Explaining detail, instantly it removes. Then all the questions, I am man, I am female, I am so, and all these things will be solved. Agadushana. Now we have to find out what are the problems of life. There is the next question. That is Vivekananda, of course. Vivekananda. There is no, what is called this, a difficulty or any doubt about it. All the instruction, all the scriptures, all the teachers. I heard something about Guru Bada, doctrine of Guru also. So Guru will help. So why should I seek the Guru? Why not? After all, Guru is a good person. He's not a robber or the highwayman. Or coming with what is called, the modern, all the weapons to kill you. Not like that. He's a good man. What is the harm to listen to him and follow a few instructions? Because our scriptures say, Guru is equivalent to God. And Gurus are not many. Guru is one. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna is regarded as the world teacher by Vivekananda. And why? Because he has seen this thing. Thousands of people approached and all their, what is called, miseries are eliminated and all this thing. And if you study the Shankha Yuga and other yugas, even the Buddha's philosophy and his, what is called, Four Noble Truths, it is all everything here. Miseries, and it is not why we suffer. That question, I'll come back to this. How many minutes I have?
No, all done, Maharaj.
No.
Even the additional minutes also are
No, because I'm not yet to touch the main thing. Nirodhana samahito mano, niroki tabo kripai. The best. Now, you may say, Vivekananda is telling that he has that absorption in God consciousness through the grace and power of his teacher. Is it not? Then what about us? We have not seen Sri Ramakrishna. Then why it will come to us? Then why Vivekananda has written this thing? Nirodhana. Patanjali first, what is called aphorism on yoga. What is yoga? Chitta vritti nirodha. Restraining of your wave thoughts. All your questions, if you can do it, you are blessed. There is no, you are blessed. Next question is, as seen by Sri Ramakrishna, seen by Vivekananda. I'll take only a few minutes, don't worry. All right.
Maharaj, we will all come to Berkeley to listen to this.
Okay.
All other nice points you have.
No. Vivekananda was challenged later on when he became successful in preaching this religion of Vedanta to the world by his own people. By who? By his own people. One question, a delicate question, they put to him, you are a monk. We all together went to see Ramakrishna, we received his grace. And what is divine consciousness at the touch of Sri Ramakrishna, we also felt, experienced. You and we. And we also instructed by the same teacher, Sri Ramakrishna, to follow certain rigid rules. And you also. But we find free mixing. You did in your life all free mixing. While you are traveling here and there, living with these people, that people, opposite gender, this and that. What is all this nuisance? It's a really question to them. Why did you do this? We can support it. See? After all, Shiva, he became very serious. Seeing he serious, brother disciple got a little scared. What is the matter? Then he said that, look, Sri Ramakrishna has made me wipe out all the consciousness of gender. Wherever I may be, with whom I am mixing, with whom I am living or sleeping in the same bed, it doesn't matter. But there is no sense of consciousness of gender. Sri Ramakrishna has wiped out it from me. They got alarmed, stuck. And I don't know whether they believed or not. To verify it, they also put to him another test, which I will not tell you. It is unwritten. So this is the truth is if it is. And they believed. Vivekananda was told again and again that yes, he told him. So he believed. This is all Vedanta, is it not? So if Sri Ramakrishna is the very embodiment of the truths of religion, mean Vedanta, all the scriptures of the world also. So this is the culmination of knowledge. So if we attain to this state, it solves our problem. So I will keep it. I leave another question related to it to my next speaker, who is the master of all the commentaries of the Upanishad and Vedas, Tattvamaya Ananda. He is the second. He is coming here, so he will answer the question. What is my question? Okay. My question to him will be here to take up right now.
Answer that, Maharaj.
No, I'm not answer. How is it, the same problem which you raised here, how is it the one consciousness without a second, so ikshate, he wished to become many. Okay, what is this? Consciousness. But in this world, physical world today, through the grace of physical science, we find the existence of so many elements, physical elements, power, energy working in minutest form. But we find lack of consciousness in them. Only in the human being it is consciousness. If Brahman is on, everything is Brahman, how the Brahman consciousness, one divine consciousness, is appearing and behaving in material world in these peculiar ways, and it is infinite. If you study this space, you know, you lose yourself. And how is it the human being, what is specialty to human being? Speciality, we have got the physical body, senses, then our mental life, emotional life, and all these things, intelligence also, prana also, living powers and all these things. How it differs? You have to answer. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, I must thank all the Swamis for inviting me and accepting me to be here.
Thank you, Aparanandaji. We should have your talk sometimes when there is no time limit at all. Because your wisdom is not caught in the time and space. So now, Tattvamayanandaji from Vedanta Society of San Francisco, he will speak about Vivekananda, the Bhashya, Ramakrishna, the Sutra.
Revered monks, revered nuns and devotees and friends. These two words, the Sanskrit words, Bhashyam and Sutra. Now, Bhashya means an interpretation. In Vedantic hermeneutical tradition, it means an interpretation, either in verse, in metrical form, or in prose, of a work which is expressed in brief statements, sutras. So, sutrartho varnide yatra padam sutranusaribhihi. So, akyena pujyanti sutram sutra bhashyam bhashyavido viduhu. So, padani cha varnyante, that's idea is added there. So, an interpretative work in which sutras are taken up for interpretation and exposition. So, padani cha varnyante. And along with that, a grand edifice of philosophical superstructure is also built. That is called Bhashya. And in Vedantic tradition, the archetypal Bhashyakara is Shankaracharya. And Sutra is somewhat different. Alpakshara masandigdham saravat vishruto mukham Astobha manavadyamcha sutram sutra vido vidhu. Now, a pithy statement, in brief statement, sometimes it could be just a few phrases or words or even letters. See, the last sutra of Ashtadhyayi is that's the last sutra. It's only just 2 letters. Now, coming to Swamiji and Sri Ramakrishna, you find whatever Swamiji spoke about, spiritual humanism, national reconstruction, harmony of the traditional and modern, harmony of the Occidental and Oriental, harmony between science and technology, synthesis of the secular and spiritual. All these ideas are, in fact, Swamiji's Siddhantas. Bhashya has got 5 ingredients. That is, Vishaya, Sangati, Purvaksha, Siddhanta in tradition. A subject matter, certain doubts with regard to different views expressed in a book, then the connective harmonizing principle, certain objections, and a conclusive statement. Now, you find apparently there is an apparent contradiction between what you find in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and in the complete works. Sri Ramakrishna says, you should first realize God. What business do you have to go about lecturing, teaching others? Have you realized God? Swamiji says, spread this message all over the world. This shall no more be a rahasya to be confined to the Himalayas and hermitages. It should be brought down to be practiced by the people in the streets and the kings in their palaces. Swamiji says, we must take out this Vedanta and broadcast it everywhere in this world without asking any question whether the listeners are fit for that or not. So Swamiji, see, there is an apparent contradiction. Again, Sri Ramakrishna says, God realization is the supreme goal of human existence. Swamiji says, who is the God? The man or woman living next door to you is the visible God. Swamiji, in many contexts, says, we had to look upon the whole creation as an expression of the divine principle. So you can find all these apparent contradictions. Again, Swamiji himself became a bridge connecting the East with the West. All the Oriental ideas that have become popular in our own times, which have influenced the great thinkers of modern America, were brought here by Swamiji. And Swamiji interpreted in a language, in a style and a diction that will be understood and that will be intelligible to people living during the post-industrial age, in the age of science and technology, in an age where religion and God have taken a bad name. Now, what Swamiji did was, Swamiji took all these concepts from Sri Ramakrishna's teachings and then interpreted all these ideas as principles and concepts which are necessary for the modern world. In this respect, Swamiji's method of writing a bhashya is closer to Plato's early dialogues, which are supposed to be the bhashyas of Socrates' teachings, or Xenophon's Memorabilia, which is also a bhashya of Socrates' teachings. Because Plato didn't follow statements and sentences of Socrates. Plato took all these ideas and then conceptualized, philosophized those ideas in the form of concrete philosophical and idealistic principles. That was precisely what Swamiji did. Take, for example, universal religion. Swamiji said, religion is not a matter of conventions, principles, ideas, or philosophical writings. Swamiji said, realization, as was quoted earlier, religion is the realization, the manifestation of divinity already in man. And again, Swamiji said, religion is spirituality, religion is realization. And religion is something which we normally practice in our life when the whole world becomes temple. Every act becomes an act of worship. Every thought becomes meditation. And practically, the secular and spiritual merge into one. Our whole life becomes spiritualized. So there is no distinction between secular and spiritual. Swamiji harmonizes the secular and the spiritual, the scientific and religious, the rational and the irrational. Practically, what Swamiji established was harmony at all levels. A religion which is essentially dialogical in form. Again, practical Vedanta, Atmano Mokshartham Jagat Hitaya cha. Actually, the genesis of the ideal of practical Vedanta could be traced to an incident, an episode in Sri Ramakrishna's life when he went on a pilgrimage to Baidyanath temple near Devghar, where he refused to move away from there till his disciple agreed to distribute food, clothing, and other necessary items, things around among the people, poor people living there. Now, Swamiji, this idea was developed by Swamiji into the revolutionary spiritual concept of practical Vedanta, or we can say spiritual humanism, as he called it. Spiritual humanism enables us to look upon the entire creation, the whole world, as one spiritual family. Today you find great thinkers like Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins criticizing religion as something irrational and unscientific. I believe if they had an opportunity to listen to Swamiji, they would have agreed that true religion, interpreted as spirituality, has a place in modern man's life, and it doesn't contradict the teachings of modern ideas of humanism or science. Again, Swamiji speaks about the evolution of karma. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna said that he didn't bother much about bread-winning education. Swamiji said we must spread secular education among the women folk and downtrodden people of India of 19th century. When people were illiterate, economically backward, socially backward, Swamiji said, echoing Sri Ramakrishna's teachings that religion is not for empty stomach, Swamiji said the need of the hour is to spread education, mind you, not only spiritual education, but secular education. Science, technology, chemistry, physics, and all these things should be spread among the common people, illiterate people, so that the economic condition of the country should be raised. Mind you, this idea came from Swamiji in the context of the extremely backward condition of India in 19th century. When he traveled all over India, Swamiji found a nation which could boast of the most ancient civilization in the world, a civilization which had reached its zenith of perfection before Egypt, ancient Egypt, or Syria, or Babylon, or Greece, or Aztec or Mayan. Any of these civilizations were even contemplated upon. Before that, Indian civilization had reached its perfection. But that nation is now has become a caricature. Poverty, economic degradation, and foreign domination for no less than 700 years. Swamiji said, well, religion should be interpreted in modern times as a positive philosophy of life, which is life building, character building, nation building, which eradicates poverty, illiteracy, and economic inequality, which raises the common people to a higher level of social living. So you can find a new Siddhanta, a religion or a spiritual tradition which was normally interpreted to be something essentially contemplative in nature, meditative in nature, introspective in nature, was given the form of a universal spiritual humanism by Swami Vivekananda. In fact, when Swamiji came to America, the modern world had already started questioning the very existence of religion. Karl Marx and Engels had already started influencing the educated people. Darwin dealt a death blow to the interpretation of Genesis, the traditional school of creationism. In that age, Swamiji said, true religion, as lived by Sri Ramakrishna and as practiced by Sri Ramakrishna, is not against science. It's not against humanism. It serves the twin goals of human existence, not only spiritual, but also the secular. A religion or a spiritual tradition which closes its eyes to the realities of secular life in this world has no right to call, no right to exist, according to Swamiji. He was very radical. See, every orthodoxy has a sacred duty to perform, namely to dig its own grave. The earlier it does it, the better for it. The longer it delays it, the worse death it will die. You can put it in the works of Karl Marx and you will be very happy. So Swamiji was much more radical. Just imagine Sri Ramakrishna's Sri Ramakrishna's teachings expressed in ordinary language. In the context of 19th century India, became a life-building, a universalizing, a synthesizing, a harmonizing philosophy in the hands of Swami Vivekananda. This is the masterly technique of a real Bhashyakara. What Shankara did to Bhadrayana Vyasa, Swamiji did on a much larger scale, on a global scale. He had two approaches. When it comes to India, Swamiji wanted India to raise not only economically, not only spiritually, but also economically. Swamiji reminded Indians to be proud of its heritage, but he also said there is something wrong with your social structure. And true religion should solve those problems. And addressing the Western world, Swamiji said, behind this apparent luxury and peal of laughter, there is a sob, a wailing sound, misery, and wretchedness. So Swamiji wanted to give a modern, life-building, universal religion to the Western world and a nation-building spiritual tradition to India. That is his Siddhanta. A religion which enables you to spiritualize the entire life. A religion which, when practiced, will help you to merge the secular and spiritual into one harmonious whole. A religion which doesn't recognize boundaries of culture or nation. A religion which enables you to realize the divine principle within, the immanent within, which also enables you to realize the omnipresent outside, which makes you move closer to God, but also enables you to look upon entire creation as one spiritual family. This was the Siddhanta which Swamiji gave to the world. Thank you. Namaskar.
That was a very good exposition. Thank you, Tattvamayananji. Now we have Pravrajika Shuddhatma Prana. Her topic is somewhat similar points. Some points have been already taken up by Tattvamayananji. She is speaking about reconciliating Vivekananda and Ramakrishna. You should, of course, understand it as not Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda are at loggerheads, but reconciliation is our idea of Sri Ramakrishna and our idea of Vivekananda.
For a few moments, I thought he was going to give my talk. So, regarding this topic, there are 3 points I picked out. There are other points that could be mentioned, but there are 3 points that I picked out. First, why did Ramakrishna choose Swamiji as his main message bearer? Second, did Swamiji really deviate from Ramakrishna's teachings, as some people think? And third, how did Swamiji incorporate Ramakrishna in the Ramakrishna mission? So first, why did Ramakrishna choose Swamiji? According to Swami Saradananda, before most of his disciples came to him, Ramakrishna had known through his visions and instructions from the Divine Mother that his message would spread all over the world and enter the minds of people all over the world. As Swami Saradananda said, the Master who is established in Bhavamukha will enter people's minds as liberal ideas, breaking all narrow barriers, putting people in his new mold, and binding them together with a unique cord of unity. So in this state of Bhavamukha, Ramakrishna's mind was united with the cosmic mind, or you could say the mind of the Divine Mother. And thus his teachings and the results of his sadhanas entered a subtle level and spread all over the world. So why then did Ramakrishna need anybody to spread his message? And why, of all people, did he choose Swamiji? On the surface, at least, they seemed to be poles apart when Swamiji came to him. First of all, as we know, Ramakrishna had divine visions regarding Swamiji. But from another point of view, we could say that he also knew he needed a person who could speak his message both to the East and the West in a way that all could understand. Yes, the ideas were there in the subtle realm, but he needed a person, a voice, who could express those ideas in modern terminology in the physical realm. Swamiji was the perfect voice. Yet when Swamiji first came to Ramakrishna, he seemed to be the most unlikely candidate. In those days, Swamiji was adamant in his belief that his Western way of thinking was right, and the old Indian traditions were wrong and even superstitious. And amazingly, Ramakrishna never tried to convince him otherwise. Instead, he just steered Swamiji towards another way of looking at things. So when Swamiji's training was over, his Western outlook was not destroyed, but it was rather broadened and deepened by the ancient Indian heritage. And this was a heritage that had been lived to the fullest by Ramakrishna himself, yet lived with a Western scientific outlook that demanded verification at every step of the way. So they were not so far apart as they seemed. So Swamiji, as Ramakrishna's voice, took what was already in the subtle realm through Ramakrishna's sadhanas and made the ideas manifest in the gross realm, thus helping them to spread even more. And this is why Ramakrishna said that Swamiji was not different from him. Second, did Swamiji really deviate from Ramakrishna's teachings, as some people think? We should remember that through both words and actions, Ramakrishna reiterated again and again to the other disciples that Swamiji was to be their leader after his passing away. He wanted no doubt on this point, and there was a reason for this. When Swamiji came back from his first visit to the West and started the relief work, some of his brother disciples expressed doubts about the work, thinking they might be deviating from Ramakrishna's teachings and message. And considering the fact that Swamiji's methods seemed so different, this was understandable. At that time, most of the other disciples did not have the foresight that Swamiji had, a foresight that was based on both spiritual visions and deep understanding of the direction that society at large was heading. Yet, such was their faith in Ramakrishna that in spite of their misgivings, all of Swamiji's brother disciples stood behind him and worked with him. And gradually, they all came to understand the larger mission, and they all supported him, though for some of them, this understanding came a little later after Swamiji's passing away. Yet, the surprising thing is that even more than 100 years later, the debate still goes on in a few Orthodox circles in India and even among some Western academics as to whether or not Swamiji deviated from the spirit of Ramakrishna's teachings. If we think about it, we find that the disciples of every great religious leader, Christ, Buddha, Chaitanya, and others, they preached nothing but their own leaders, their own teachers, sadhanas, and realizations. The sadhanas that these disciples taught to the following generations were nothing but their leaders' own sadhanas. The leaders' realizations became the goal for those coming after them. So can we really believe that Swamiji was the lone exception to this, that he preached something different? I think a serious look at the gospel will show that Ramakrishna's sadhanas and realizations were about attaining the state of vijnana, that is, seeing the divine everywhere. Once, when Swamiji pleaded with Ramakrishna to be allowed to remain absorbed in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Ramakrishna scolded him. He said, "You're a very small-minded person. There is a state even higher than that. All that exists art thou. It is you who sing that song." So this was the goal presented to Swamiji. But Ramakrishna also emphasized this as both a goal and a sadhana for others. We find in many places in the gospel, Ramakrishna says something like, if God can be worshipped through a clay image, then why not through a man? And in the Lila Prasanga, we know he said, you speak of compassion for all beings. No, it is not compassion, but service to them is Shiva. And we find again and again in Ramakrishna's own life that he himself practiced this, and not only during the time of his sadhana, but in later days also. And third, how did Swamiji incorporate Ramakrishna in the mission? Another way of looking at this is, what is the purpose for any organization of establishing, of any religious organization, of establishing an organization? Isn't it to present a mold based on the leader's life and teachings for the followers in later generations to fit into? Christ said, take up the cross and follow me. Not literally, of course, but in a figurative way. Buddha said, be a lamp unto yourselves. So they are telling us, see what I have done and mold your lives accordingly. Similarly, both Swamiji and Swami Saradananda have spoken of the Ramakrishna mold. For example, Swamiji made it clear that those who are followers of Ramakrishna must follow Ramakrishna's example and not limit the infinite aspect of God. Rather, for their own good and for the good of society, they should follow the ideal of Ramakrishna in becoming both vast and deep. Swamiji said, but the wonder of it is that in this Ramakrishna form, there has been a combination of ideas deeper than the sea and vaster than the sky, transcending all records of history. This proves that vastness, catholicity, and intensity in the highest degree can coexist in a single individual, and a society also can be built on the same pattern, for society is only an aggregate of individuals. Again, in the rule book for the Ramakrishna order, Swamiji said, referring to Ramakrishna, he said, such a unique personality, a synthesis of jnana, yoga, bhakti, and karma in their utmost perfection, never appeared before in the human race. The formation of such a perfect character is the aim of this age, and everyone should strive for that alone with all his might. Therefore, everyone should bear this in mind, that anyone showing deficiency in even a single one of these, that is jnana, yoga, bhakti, etc., has not had his character perfectly cast in the mold of Sri Ramakrishna. So helping people to cast themselves in this Ramakrishna mold is what the Ramakrishna mission stands for, and it is why Swamiji started it. But Swamiji also understood that the highest stage of the Ramakrishna mold is the stage of vijnana. This was the goal to be attained, and casting oneself in this Ramakrishna mold was the way to attain it. Now, after finishing this talk, I thought, this Ramakrishna mold, does this sound too sectarian? And I thought, no, the Ramakrishna mold itself is the antithesis of sectarianism. Thank you.
So the last of the panelists on this discussion on Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda before we begin the interfaith discussion is Swami Avikarananda from the Seattle Center, and he will be speaking about Vivekananda and the great prophets of the world. Swami Avikarananda.
My dear respected monastic brothers, sisters, and friends, it seems that I'm faced with a dilemma. I see I have 5 minutes to give a talk. I do? Well, what I was hoping to say that one of the things I learned from all my senior brothers and monks is that I should finish what I complete or what I start. So I hope that I won't be... So I'd like to share with you today how some of the great prophets of the world, in the light of Swami Vivekananda, impacted my life. I was raised Roman Catholic, as were my 5 siblings. Going to church every Sunday morning was more a matter of obedience to our parents than being devout Catholics. And if we were good and didn't argue about it, we might go to McDonald's after Mass. All I understood about Jesus Christ was that he was a great prophet, a great man, and because of him we got beautifully wrapped Christmas presents and colorful Easter eggs. When I was 16 years old, my parents separated and eventually divorced. A topic of discussion between my mom and us children was whether we were going to continue going to church. Divorce was not looked upon very kindly in our community at that time. So we decided to stop going and saw little to no purpose to it any longer. What mattered now was coping as a single-parent family, my working mom with 6 kids, some of us with part-time jobs. Otherwise, we were engaged in doing chores, studies, and our other interests. My mom, though, encouraged philosophical inquiry. She wanted us to think for ourselves so that as we grew older, we could decide if religion was for us or not, and choose which religion. For myself, the seed of religion didn't start to sprout until a few years later. It started with self-inquiry and visits to temples of knowledge, libraries, to gather as much information as I could to try to make some kind of informed decision. I asked myself, what am I? What was the purpose of life? What do I do with this life allotted to me? Ideas of career and family were there. And I also wondered about the validity of religion. Did it have a purpose beyond just moral teachings? Was there a God, a heaven, or a hell? Was belief in God escapism, or plays of the imagination to escape from the pains and the realities of life? At that time in my life, it seemed to be more like an opportunity for the unscrupulous to prey on the suffering, the hopeless, the gullible, and the confused. These thoughts occupied me in the late 70s and early 80s, as controversies surrounded the Rajneesh and Hare Krishna movements. the Jim Jones with mass suicides in Jonestown, all wanted the perfect community to practice their beliefs and live their lives in peace, but were instead controlled by misguided individuals on some kind of ego trip. Was there real peace, I wondered? Was this the practice of religion? Was religion all sham, or were there some deeper truths? This was in complete contrast to what I read and understood as the teachings of Jesus Christ in the Holy Bible, and by some of his sincerest followers like St. Francis of Assisi, or Thomas à Kempis, who wrote Imitation of Christ. They were my inspiration at the time. And I found that the understanding of Jesus Christ amongst monastic Christianity, as practiced by the Benedictine and Franciscan monks, seemed more in line with Jesus Christ's teachings and than those being professed by the different forms of Christianity. A life of prayer, austerity, and discipline seemed more in line with what Jesus meant, rather than trying to satisfy every desire that comes to my mind. Amongst monastic Christians, I found sincere humility, honesty, unselfishness, willingness to happily go through suffering so that others won't have to suffer. They were more Christ-like than most churchgoers that I was familiar with. But I was curious about the other prophets too, in particular, Lord Buddha. He also wanted to relieve the suffering of humanity by understanding the cause of our suffering. He concluded that our incessant desires cause attachment, and then when we try to be free of these attachments, because we either realize their transitory nature or they yield results that backfire on us or that we never intended, then we suffer. To overcome this suffering, though, he provided a path known as the Eightfold Path. It excited me that there was a systematic path that I could follow that would ensure success if I could follow it sincerely. Namely, they were right view, right intention, right speech, etc. But what amazed me the most was how Christ-like Buddha was. All the virtues you would expect to find in a saint. Both had love for something higher than themselves. They had love and compassion for humanity. Nothing was superficial. They had honest humility. They were free from selfishness. And whatever they believed in, whether it was God as the Father in heaven, or as God, or no God that can be spoken about, they believed in it with wholehearted sincerity and dedicated their lives to it. I found them refreshing, opposite to the way we humans typically behave. Their teachings were simple, yet seemed difficult to practice. We have learned to compromise here and there to justify our actions and understanding, so much so that we have confounded and confused ourselves. I understood that the core teachings of Buddhism originated in Hinduism, so I began to read the Bhagavad Gita and some overviews of the Upanishads, only to find that Hinduism contained its own share of confusion. No known founder of single authority to rely upon. Revered prophets like Rama and Krishna were buried in fantastic stories and thousand-year-old legends, stories of great wars, always fighting and then preaching virtue and nonviolence. Commentators seemed free to interpret the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita to suit their own points of view. There was freedom to believe in God or not believe in God. So many seemingly contradicting thoughts. How could they all coexist in Hinduism? It was no wonder that so-called gurus could come to the West, attract a loyal following, and then end up and get caught up in materialism and end up in all kinds of trouble, legal trouble, investigations, and moral behavior, and so forth. They couldn't even understand their own scriptures. Their activities put me on guard and made me overly cautious and distrustful of how Hinduism was being presented in the West. In the midst of my confusion, I was also being exposed to the idea of how so many points of view could be considered valid within Hinduism without the suffering and bloodshed over religious ideas seen in other religions. There was no doubt in my mind that Jesus Christ, Buddha, Krishna, Muhammad, and others like them were good men, great men in fact. These prophets were anything but confused and hopeless. Instead, they dedicated their lives to removing misery and confusion. They taught the truth as they experienced it, to the common people in simple language. And they gave hope. The hope that we too can be free of suffering. And what was their gain? Did they do all this just for a place to sleep? For a few grains of rice and some curry? For honor, name, and fame in their lifetime? Or martyrdom, so that they will be remembered for thousands of years? There is no historical indication that they did any of this for personal gain. In fact, they quietly bore all kinds of suffering heaped upon them. But they stuck to their views and experience throughout, and only prayed for us that we may not suffer, all out of love. And then I came across Swami Vivekananda. He found inspiration in all these great prophets and gave growing tributes to them. Sure, he saw the horrors of organized religion, but still he focused on the good sides of each respective faith, the life and teachings of the great prophets themselves. He expanded on them in the light of his own faith, Hinduism, which he preferred to call Vedanta. To my mind, he brought harmony to all the diversity within Hinduism and all the other faiths. In his own words, he said, "I have found it possible in my life to worship all of them and be ready for all that will come." What little I could understand of Hinduism made sense to me after he cut through the superstition, the dogma, falsehood, and hypocrisy to expose the hidden truths experienced by all sincere spiritual seekers. His willingness to boldly express these views amidst likely ridicule earned my trust, especially as I distrusted any of the current-day examples of self-proclaimed prophets. He was a man who, in recent history, interacted with thousands of people. His photos were taken in India and in the West, parts of his life and words duly recorded by M in the Gospel of Ramakrishna and by his admirers, understand.
I'm also admirer.
Yes. As well as there were reports by the news media, all that confirmed that such a man actually existed in our history. He faced the modern-day problems with dignity, and his life is an example of how we should live. He had tremendous faith in himself. As he would later say about great prophets, in these great teachers you will find this sign, that they have intense faith in themselves. I realized that here was a man whose historical existence cannot be doubted, who went deeper into the analysis of religion than I could ever hope to in my lifetime. And because of him, the practice of religion became relevant to me. In his words, can religion really accomplish anything? It can. It brings to man eternal life. It has made man what he is and will make of this human animal a god. This is what religion can do. Take religion from human society, and what remains? Nothing but a forest of brutes. I fell in love with him, but yet I was unable to reconcile the motive power behind his actions. there's a Western saying, did he walk the talk? In other words, were his actions and words the same? He acquired name and fame after the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893 and became very popular. He rubbed shoulders with the rich and famous during his years in the US and Europe. Yet, whether it was the glorifiers praising him or the critics condemning him, he brushed it all off and stayed true to his purpose, to fearlessly proclaim the truth, that man is essentially divine. And knowing this truth will set a man free from suffering. I felt that here was a man that understood not just Hinduism, but religion in general. If Vivekananda wasn't the dynamic messenger that he was, I would not have ever looked at perhaps the greatest prophet the world has yet to know, his master, his teacher, his guru, Sri Ramakrishna, who is regarded as the prophet of the harmony of all faiths, who spoke from direct experience and conviction that the goal of human life was to realize God, to realize the inherent divinity in man, and that all of us can do it. He experienced God following many paths and attitudes, reaffirming the scriptures that, as many faiths, so many paths, and that God is everywhere, to serve God and man, regardless of caste, creed, or any other distinctions that can cause separation. Swami Vivekananda's mission was to disseminate those grand teachings, make them easy enough to understand without diluting them, and make them relevant and practical to today, so that the suffering masses can be lifted up, and at the same time, revitalize the idea that God can be realized by everyone, even in today's scientific world, where questioning and reasonable answers are expected. I gradually understood and trusted that the motive power behind Swami Vivekananda through this period was the love that he had for his master, Sri Ramakrishna. I'd like to conclude by saying that though the world has 7 billion people today, and untold billions have come and gone over the past thousands of years, it is a wonder that the world hasn't seen hundreds, if not thousands, of such known prophets. It is one thing to glorify them and give them hundreds of tributes, and quite another to make their life and teachings our own. Swami Vivekananda tells us, take up one idea, make that the one idea of your life, think of it, dream of it, live on that idea, let the brain, the muscles, the nerves, every part of your body be full of that idea, and just leave every other idea alone. This is the way to success, and this is the way that great spiritual giants are produced. Thank you.